Welcome to tonight's live stream. I am going to get started in a moment. I just need to let everybody on social media know the stream is on the air. Okay. Okay, nobody's in the room yet, so let's get started. Sorry about the sharp sounds, that's just the MacBook Pro. Thank you, Travania Joseph. I'm glad to hear that you bought one of my books and enjoyed it. I'm glad that I really appreciate your support. I'm glad you enjoyed my work. Hey, Keating Work, glad to see you here. I'm gonna do a little progress before I start tonight's show. I have been working on a new comic book script for ISIS: The Beauty Myth, the 2013 ISIS series book, and I've been having a lot of fun working on this new script. I'm about 20 pages into the script. I'm hoping to eventually get it to 32. I'm trying to adapt a 75-page book, trying to condense it into 32 pages, and I'm hoping I can go out here and get this done. Hello, Omega. I haven't seen Arcane yet, so I don't know what you're talking about. Um, I'm glad you really liked the cover of Isis, Wrath, and Revenge of the Cyber Goddess covers. Keating Work. Bill Walker did a fantastic job on both of those, and I really liked his work. That was the first book that he actually did, and it was the first book that introduced John Haynes, was the Wrath of the Cyber Goddess book. So I'm glad that you like the art on those covers. I hope to bring the Cyber Goddess. I don't think I can bring the Cyber Goddess back after Revenge, but she's a character that some people like, and I really like doing ISIS series stories. But if you want to start the whole story with the Cyber Goddess, you should get The Beauty Myth. That is the book you should be getting. And that book basically starts the entire feud between ISIS and Rahima. So with that said, I'm going to do a little perfunctory. Again, I've got John Haynes' A Death Store, the comic, coming out. And right now you can get it at lulu.com in paperback. And you can also get the 2023 SJS Direct book, John Haynes 1987. And you can also get John Haynes Godbreaker. All three of these books are available. Well, two of these books are available at Amazon.com. The John Haynes comic is available on Lulu right now. So with that perfunctory done, I am going to get into tonight's topic. Now, tonight's topic was inspired by a Bounding into Comics article where an individual claims that this What If writer A.C. Bradley says that Disney never paid her for script fees or for her work on Marvel Studios' Ms. Marvel. And when I look at what's happened with many of these writers who are a part of the Disney Plus platform, they really show me how inexperienced screenwriters are really doing damage to the entertainment business. Now, one of the reasons why we have so many WGA writers going on strike is because a lot of writers are not getting compensated the way they're supposed to be. Now, according to reports, one writer on the She-Hulk Disney Plus show said they were only paid, I think, about $396 in royalties. And when I look at all of the situations that have been presented in sites like Bounding into Comics as related to what's happening to these screenwriters, I have to wonder, is anybody schooling these writers about the basics of the entertainment business? Because the issues that I see being presented as related to these writers as related to business shows me nobody really has schooled many of these writers on the basics as related to doing business in Hollywood. Now, Hollywood is a business, and you need to come into that business with a business mindset, or you're going to get winding up getting taken advantage of, like many of these green writers who were working for Disney on their Disney Plus projects, like Ms. Marvel and She-Hulk Attorney at Law. Now, these green writers, they come in fresh out of school, possibly in their 20s. They have no real work experience. And because they have no real work experience, they come into the entertainment industry and they think that because people at companies like Disney are paying them some attention, they think that everything is going good. But when you come into the entertainment business, the first thing you need to do is go out here and get yourself an agent. When I look at the deals that these writers signed up for, it shows me that there possibly was no agent involved. And usually an agent is going to go out here and try to look out for their clients. And they're going to want to look out for their clients because they get 10% off the top of whatever their clients get paid. And the first thing an agent is going to do is make sure that their writers are taken care of as related to the contract. That is the first thing a seasoned agent is going to do. Make sure that that writer is out here getting paid, because the way the agent gets paid is the checks are sent to the studio to the agency, and after the agent deducts their 10% off the top, what happens is the remaining is sent to the writer, and that has to be something that you get in writing, because that's standard business as related to a writer getting paid. So when I listened to this so-called what-if creator, whose name is A.C. Bradley, who claims Disney never paid her for script fees on Marvel Studios' Ms. Marvel, I listened to that whole thing and I wondered, what type of contract did this woman sign where she wound up not getting paid as related to a project? I mean, usually when you're a writer, you're usually the person who gets, one of the people who gets paid first after the producers get their money. Usually the writer gets paid, because without the writer working on the script and working on the rewrites, nothing on the production can get done. So usually they make a writer's check a priority. So I'm sitting there wondering what's happening here as related to these writers. And I realized what really happened here is that you had this whole flood of inexperienced writers coming into the entertainment business. And as these inexperienced writers have been coming into the entertainment business, they have basically been screwing up the entire game as related to business. Now, these inexperienced writers, they don't really understand how business works in entertainment, and they are so eager to try to prove themselves that they don't go out here and follow proper protocols as related to doing business in entertainment. And this is where these writers basically mess things up for everyone, because they're coming in all by themselves. And sadly, there are no people there to go out and mentor these young writers as related to the protocols and procedures as related to the entertainment industry. Now, these young writers, they have been coming in through these streaming services into Hollywood. And many of these writers, they really don't know how business is done. So they're just eager and excited to hear, oh, somebody at Disney is paying attention to me. Somebody at Netflix is paying attention to me. Somebody at Hulu is paying attention to me. So if they want my services and they're willing to hire, I'm going to have something nice on my resume. But the whole thing is, they don't know that the covert contract that they're trying to sign with these businesses is going to hurt them as related to their finances, because the covert contract that many of these inexperienced writers want to go out here and create is believing that since Netflix or Disney or Paramount Plus or any of these streaming services are offering them a job, that this will lead to bigger jobs in the future, but they're not looking at their money right now. Now, a seasoned writer out here, they're looking at their money as related to the long term. They're not really concerned about the attention. Yeah, you got an offer, but we need to see what this offer is going to pay in the long term, because the material you're working on is seen as a wealth building asset to a seasoned writer. Now, a seasoned writer, when they look at an inquiry or a request to work on a project, they're looking at how they're going to get paid long term. They're looking at, are they going to be able to get residuals as related to the rebroadcast of that program. Moreover, they're also looking at licensing and merchandising and seeing if they can get a cut of that money as well. That's what a seasoned writer is going to look for as related to ironing out a deal with a production company. When they're out here, they're looking to find out, okay, if these people want my services, how much are they willing to pay, and how much are they willing to pay later on? That's the most important thing for them. It's not about, oh, I get an opportunity, I get my name and some credits. Yeah, that's all well and good, but the ultimate goal is making sure that you get paid 2 times. 1, you get paid in the beginning, and 2, you get paid in the end. And you want to make sure that you're getting a cut of whatever job you're on. And that's what a seasoned writer is saying to themselves. They're not really concerned about, oh, the fame and the attention. No, they are concerned about building the base for their money, and they're looking up to make sure that the base of their money is protected, because they know that their stories are creating a wealth building asset for that entertainment business. They know that the screenplays and TV scripts that they write, that's the base for all of these productions, and they want to make sure, hey, I'm going to get paid for my services, and more importantly, I'm going to get paid first along with the producers. That is the ultimate goal. You don't want to be sitting up there waiting for them to say, oh, well, we're waiting to pay you. No, you're going to make sure you get paid first, and that's what seasoned writers do. They make sure that this kind of stuff is negotiated with their agent, and they make sure that that check is sent to them as soon as that funding is approved. They make sure that they're getting their cut right off the top, and they also are making sure that they're getting a percentage of the deal. That is what a seasoned writer does. And again, I'm listening to a lot of these writers who say that they got done dirty by Disney, and I'm looking at them and I'm wondering, did you ever go out here and get any sort of information on the business? Because it's looking to me like these Disney Plus writers really, and Netflix writers really don't really understand how the business works. No, they're just seeming to me like they were really green, eager types who were just so caught up in the tension of, oh, Netflix is offering me a deal, Disney Plus is offering me a deal, Paramount's offering me a deal. I'm working with these so-called prominent characters on brands like Star Trek and Marvel and Star Wars, and they're not really thinking about how they're gonna get paid. And that's the whole thing, that when I look at what they're complaining about, I'm like, these writers are really inexperienced, because again, seasoned writer, they're gonna sit there and say, hey, wait, yeah, they're paying me attention, but I'm paying attention to how this money is gonna be allocated, because my ultimate goal on one of these projects is to get paid, and most importantly, get paid first. That's the goal of a seasoned writer, is they want to get paid, and they're making sure that the deal to get them paid is in that contract from minute one. That's the first thing you're doing when you have a seasoned writer. You're saying, okay, I want to make sure that I'm getting paid, and I'm making sure that I'm going to get paid overall. This is, yes, I'm passionate about creating a story. I'm passionate about seeing a project getting filmed. I'm passionate about making sure that I can make some sort of art. But ultimately, I know that the ultimate goal here is getting my money, because in many cases, what these studios are going to do when you do work on scripts is there are going to be a lot of scripts that are going to get rewritten and rewritten and rewritten. I mean, it may be rewritten 3, 4, 5 times, but you want to make sure that your paper is taken care of, regardless of what happens with the project. Your ultimate goal is getting paid as related to this business, but inexperienced writers, sadly, they don't really focus on aspects of the business, and they're sitting there now talking about how they were done dirty. And yeah, they were done dirty, but they were done dirty because many of these writers really did not do good due diligence as related to the business. And because they did not do good due diligence by going out here and making sure that your contract was written in a way where you're getting paid, and your contract is written in a way that ensures that you get paid, what happens is you get inexperienced writers who get played. And again, the studios, they look for inexperienced green writers. They look for green writers to get in front of so that they can go out here and take out their money from the back. So a lot of these inexperienced screenwriters, they were recruited at these streaming services, and the streaming services knew what they were doing. Yeah, they knew that they allowed these writers in the WGA, but they also knew that as these writers came into the WGA, they wouldn't really know about the policies. And what they do is they go in sideways. They go in sideways by going out here and finding a green writer, getting in front of them, getting them caught up in their attention. And as they get that green writer caught up in their attention and all of the promise of fame and prestige, what these writers do is start getting stars in their eyes. And as they get stars in their eyes, they're not really thinking critically about their money. And as they don't think critically about their money, what happens is the studios basically rip these writers off. And that's what's happened with many of these writers at these streaming services, these 21, 22, maybe even up to 25, 26-year-old writers. Again, writers who really, again, don't understand the business side of writing. And again, the business side of writing is something that's really hard to learn about unless you're out here and in the business. Again, it took me years to learn about the business side of writing, and I'm a very creative guy, and I usually like to focus on creation. But one of the things I understood coming in as I got into my late 20s and my early 30s was I needed to understand the importance of having a business mind in addition to having a creative mind. And that's something many young 20-somethings don't focus on. And that's how they are basically ruining the game as related to entertainment. Many of your young, inexperienced writers, they're more focused on trying to write big stories to impress big executives. And they want to try to appeal to those executives as related to helping them perpetuate their agendas. And this is how we get many of what they call the SJW woke writers. Now, these SJW woke writers, that, as people call them, I just call them now inexperienced writers, because an inexperienced writer is somebody who doesn't know much about life, doesn't know much about business, and they have been messing up the entertainment business, because what happens is the studios go out here and use these inexperienced writers to go out here and further what people are calling their SJW agendas on these streaming services and with movies like the Little Mermaid remake or the Indiana Jones and the Dial of Destiny or the Star Wars movies. It's really these inexperienced writers who are doing damage, because what they want to do with these writers is have somebody who is inexperienced and will go out here and parrot what they want said. And that's the type of writer that they want. because what a seasoned writer is going to do is they're going to challenge a lot of the studio's executives who greenlight these projects, and they're going to challenge them because these writers know that their reputation is based on the current project that they're working on. And because they know that you're only good as your last project, they want to make sure that their last project is a really good one. So you will get a lot of pushback from a seasoned writer because they know that their next gig is based on their current gig. They don't have the stars in their eyes like many of these inexperienced, what they call SJW woke writers, who have stars in their eyes and believe that if they after they do this project, they will get another one. But what a seasoned writer knows is that if this project fails at the box office, there are not going to be any more gigs for them waiting at the studios. They know that if you have a flop, or in the case of some directors or actors, 3 flops in a row, basically all of the jobs that you were trying to get dry up because you were considered to be someone who is not bankable. But a green, inexperienced writer, all they're thinking about is, hey, these guys are paying me attention. So they're thinking that there's an opportunity to go out here and make lots of money. They think that there's going to be another job like in many of the retail jobs that they had, where they could go out here and mess up bad and there'll be another job. But in the screenwriting business, if you've had 1 failure, or in the case of a season, 3 failures, you're not getting any more calls because people are going to see that you're not somebody who's creating bankable material. And that's something the inexperienced writer doesn't understand. All they're thinking about is, oh, I'm in here, they're letting me write scripts, not understanding this executive is basically setting you up for failure. And in some cases, I believe deliberately setting people up for failure, because what they know is that if this guy, again, he's cheap, he's young, he's inexperienced, and if he fails or she fails, then it's not a problem to them, because there are more young, inexperienced 20-somethings who will go out here and write screenplays for them. And as these young, inexperienced writers go out here and write this material, they don't know that this material basically is setting them up for failure. And that's where I look at these inexperienced writers. Again, they're messing up the entertainment business, because when you've got an inexperienced writer writing what they call SJW woke material, it is messing up the business, because what it does is it makes it where you get constantly bad product, and this bad product, this creates a lot of bad box office, and it creates a road where a lot of these studios, again, are struggling. But the reason why they are struggling is because the studios have become greedy. And as the studios have become greedy, what they have done is, again, looking to try to find the cheapest person. But the cheapest person isn't the best person for the job, because many of what they call the SJW woke writers are not really qualified for the job, because they just don't have the 1, creative experience, and 2, they don't have the life experience to be good writers. Now, a writer is considered to be a solid writer for 2 reasons. 1, they have the years of experience as related to the craft of storytelling. And I say craft because writing is a craft, and it takes years for you to develop your skills and become a master of your craft. And that's not something that you do in a college or a university. No, it's done as you're going out here and working on multiple projects. And over the last 10 years, it's been hard for writers to become masters of their craft, because what Hollywood executives have done is they have taken writers out of the writer's room, and they have also taken them off set. You got more writers working on these Zoom meetings, and that's not really a good way for you to learn about craft, because you learn craft as a writer by going out here and working right at the side of a seasoned writer. You work at the side of them as they're giving you constructive criticism. And you also learn by going on set and seeing the production process. And as you're a part of the production process, you are talking with the producers, you're talking with the director, you're talking with actors, you're getting feedback sent directly to you. But that's not something that's done over the last 10 years. No, over the last 10 years, what has been happening is the writers have not been an active part of the entire process. And what happens is these days is a writer gets booked by an agent. They usually go to a Zoom meeting. What happens is they go out here and talk to the writer about buying the script. And after they buy the script, what happens is the studio then goes out here and hires some new writers who usually are young and inexperienced to rewrite material. And as they rewrite material, what happens is the material winds up falling apart because the original writer isn't there to tell you all of the nuances as related to the story. Because it's very important to have the original writer on a project actively involved, because they can tell you about the layers, they can tell you about the nuance, and they can tell you about how a scene is supposed to go. They can talk directly to people and let them know how this whole thing that they imagined in their head will come to life on screen. That is what a writer would do when they're on set. But sadly, writers aren't on set. And that's another reason why we're getting so much terrible material. We're getting so much terrible material because the person who is needed to translate that material is not on set working with directors and writers. No, that writer is not an active part of the process. And that's why we see a major decline in quality of much of the content we're seeing today. Because when you have an inexperienced writer working with a director and a producer, they're basically steamrolling this inexperienced writer because they don't know anything about process and they have no real connection to the material. And because they have no real connection to the material, there's no real heart or passion as related to the material, because the people involved in it are completely detached. And even worse than detached, they just come from a place of having no real life experience. And because they have no real life experience, what happens is they don't really understand what a story is supposed to have that makes us connect with anything. Because one of the other things that inexperienced writers do that are messing up the game as related to screenwriting and storytelling is your inexperienced writers, what they're doing is going out here and they just are not able to connect with the audience at all, because they're just looking to try to get brownie points with whatever executive that they have a covert contract with. And because they don't have any life experience, they can't really tell you, okay, this scene that you're writing is everything is all wrong and everything isn't working, because they really don't have the life experience to tell you what this story is all about, because they got that story secondhand. And as they got that story secondhand, they really don't have enough life experience to tell you what about that story is special, because part of being a good writer is having life experience. And again, life experience is something that allows you to put nuances on a story. It allows you to go out here and put things on a story, details in a story that help bring it to life and help you more also go out here and create a story that people can identify with and relate to. Because when you write from your life experience, what it does is it allows people to be able to say, hey, that character is just like me. That experience is just like one I had. This is something that I know personally. And again, if you can do that and have people saying, hey, this is just like me, what people will do is go out here and say, hey, I like that character. I like that story. This writer is talking to me. And whatever product you produce in entertainment, whether it be a screenplay, whether it be a book, whether it be a comic, people are going to connect with it. and they're going to want to go out here and purchase that media. They're going to want to purchase it because they see an experience like theirs. But many in Hollywood don't really believe in experience. No, what they believe in is that they've got these properties like Star Wars or the MCU, and that the property is greater than the story. And this is where they go out here and recruit the inexperienced writer, because they want to be able to tell a story without having to have to deal with pushback from seasoned writers who want to give you a story with life experience. Because when you look at a movie like 2008's Iron Man, where you got to meet Tony Stark and you actually got to see a multidimensional person, a guy who was starting in the story, he was disconnected from people. And as he becomes Iron Man, he becomes connected to people. That was a major element of that story. And I believe that that came not only from the adaptation of the character, but it came from a writer who talked about life experience, thinking about being away from people and understanding what it means to connect with people and have relationships with them. Because as Tony Stark becomes Iron Man, he starts connecting with people, starts caring about people. And while the armor was meant to save his life physically, ironically, it's about saving his social life. And it allows him to, again, live actually, and not just live as related to his physical life. It allows him to be alive and allows him to have a life where he's a part of life with people instead of being detached from people. So that's the kind of thing that a seasoned writer comes in where and brings to the story. They bring that substance, and they bring that substance from their life experiences. I mean, this is something that I do with many of my stories, like in the case of the story like Spellbound, which starts the Spinsterella trilogy. I drew from a lot of my experiences in high school in the 80s. I drew from the experiences of being bullied. And yes, the story is about Matilda Crowley and how she became into the goth subculture, but it was also about how Matilda Crowley found her voice and developed her confidence. And I drew from my own experience as a guy who was an introvert who struggles with social anxiety as related to that story. So I drew from a lot of my own personal experiences as related to that story. And I also draw from my personal experiences for many of my stories, like in the case of All About Marilyn, where I talk about a faded former teen sitcom star. I'm also talking about how a person survives when they're struggling as related to their life. That's something that can come from my own personal experience when I was living on $60 a month and having to have clothes that you had to wear, old clothes, because you're still just trying to get by. You're still trying to hold on. I mean, that I could come from personal experience. And with characters like John Haynes and The Temptation of John Haynes, where he was fired in the first chapter, that came from real life experience and things that actually happened to me. So I draw from life experience in order to tell all kinds of stories. And I do that because, again, I have lived these things and I can talk about them and bring them to life in a story. And when I'm working on stories, what I like to do is, again, bring that life experience and really give people a picture of life. And that's something, again, an inexperienced writer can't do as related to entertainment, because an inexperienced writer hasn't lived enough life to be able to tell a good story. Now, I wanted to be a writer ever since I was 9 years old, and I wanted to write ever since back then. I wanted to do comic books. I wanted to write comics, and I also wanted to write books, but I didn't have enough life experience at all. And much of the stuff I wrote from about 16 to about, I'd say about 30 was not very good. And it wasn't very good because I had not lived enough life. Because when you don't live enough life, you can't really tell a story like Z Ken is talking about. And thank you, Z Ken. I'm glad you liked my newest books. I'm really glad that you enjoyed them. Again, you guys can find those books on Amazon.com right now and get a copy of them with all the feedback I'm getting. But everybody seems to enjoy them. But the whole thing is, when I was young, I thought I was doing something. I thought I was just making some awesome stuff. But when I look back at much of the writing that I wrote when I was in my teens, in my 20s, it was absolutely ridiculous. And you'll hear many people say, oh, these SJW woke writers are terrible. And yeah, they are terrible because they are inexperienced. And because they are inexperienced, they really don't have enough life experience to go out here and tell an effective story. Now, I've also heard about this in the comic book industry, and I've seen it presented in many what they call SJW woke comics, which I just call inexperienced comics. I mean, one of the reasons why I see so many comics opening up the same with the same things like sitting down and eating is because many of these young brothers and sisters, young people out here, all their whole life is just sitting in a restaurant and getting food or sitting at home and doing stuff. They've never really gone out into the world to live life. So they can't tell you a story about a superhero that makes you connect with them on any level. So when I look at comics like the Kamala Khan, Ms. Marvel, or some of the other what they call SJW woke books, what I see when I'm reading them these days is inexperience about life. And that inexperience about life, this is what's hurting the entertainment business. And it's hurting the business because you've got inexperienced people trying to sell and tell stories. But those stories, what happens is it's not resonating with people, and people are laughing at these stories or mocking them on many of the YouTube channels. But as I see it, they're mocking them because of their inexperience about life. But the real issue that leads to many of these stories being so bad is the fact that these writers, again, don't have the experience and to be able to tell a story with nuance. So the reason why we see all of the preachiness and all of the agendas just thrown out at you is because the editorial is pushing that agenda with no nuance and no creativity. No, what they do is get the 20-something kid who has no experience, tells them, oh, go write me a comic, write me a screenplay, put whatever I want in it. But the whole thing is, the story is not going to be very good. It's going to be very shallow because this person never lived any life. This person never had any life experience. This person never, ever did anything. And that shows in their storytelling, because when I look at their comic panels, there's no real detail. There's no real sense of sequence. There's no real sense of, of things that other creative writers use in their work, because they know what they're writing about. Because when I look at a writer who knows what they're writing about, I can see things in their pages. I can see the contrast. I can see the foreshadowing. I can see many of the different layers they put on a story, and I can see those layers presented to me. And that tells me that this writer is putting some depth on their words. And when they put some depth on their words, it creates a richer picture that allows me to be more into the story. That's something that I do on many of my books, like Spellbound. When I was writing Spellbound, I was not only going out here and talking about the Black Goth scene, I was also contrasting it to the crack epidemic and the horrors that people went through, because a lot of the goth scene is about celebrating darkness, but I wanted to show how some evil was going on as related to the real world. I mean, people think that people in the goth scene are really scary, but the whole thing is I wanted to contrast it by showing something scarier, and that was living in the time of the crack epidemic and having to deal with the terrorism that people went through. And I wanted to use that contrast as related to those scenes, because contrast allows you to say, okay, people say that the goth scene is dark, but I'm going to show you something a little darker. That's the kind of depth that I put into Spellbound. And when I was writing the vampire novel Eternal Night, I also used that same type of contrast, where I had the Lilith, the Black Goth, and then I had showed you the contrast, which was the world of vampires. I mean, two different dark themes, and they're contrasting each other. And that also further is contrasted by Lilith in the early scenes when she's in the church and showing the contrast between goth and the church. And again, these are the kind of layers that when you look at it, you start to go, oh, there's a deeper story. And as you look at the deeper story, you start to see a richer picture of that story. And as I was going out here and I was putting further depth on it, because I was putting names in there, like Lilith's name is from the Talmud's thing as related to the helpmeet, and the guy who was chasing her is named Adam. And I put a lot of different layers into that story, and I do that with all of my stories. And I want to go out here and again give you these kind of layers, and that's also what a seasoned writer does, because seasoned writers, not only do we write what we know, we also read a lot, and we also have gone out here and watched a lot of movies, read a lot of screenplays. I mean, this is what seasoned writers do, but an inexperienced writer, they don't really know about how to go out here and add those layers and add that complexity to a story. No, that what they know is just they don't even know basic stuff. And what's really sad about today is that many of these writers aren't getting any guidance. And instead of them getting guidance, what the executives do is just throw them out there and tell them to just write anything without understanding that a writer has to go out here and have some sort of plan as related to their story. Now, one of the things I've run into all throughout my life as a writer is you've got people out here who think because you say you're a writer, you can write anything. And no, a writer just can't write anything. So we need prep time, because in order to write something effectively, what you have to do is you have to do your research, and you have to do your research in order to make sure that all of the details are on point, and you have to do extensive research in order to make sure that everything is real in the imagination of the audience. That's something that I do all the time when I'm working on scripts. Like when I was working on All About Marilyn, I wanted to take you into LA. I wanted to take you into Hollywood. I wanted to show you 90s Hollywood as related to these low budget teen sitcoms. I did a lot of research on them. I did a lot of research on child stars. I also did a lot of research on getting a deal as related to moving forward with your career. I mean, I did a lot of research, again, thousands of hours. Same thing with the Spencerella trilogy. Watched, I mean, over 10, 15,000 hours of goth videos in order to get things right. And that all goes into a writer going out here and telling their stories. A writer has to go out here and do hours and hours of research before we put fingers to the keyboard. We just don't go in and just write anything and just come out of nowhere. And one of the things I find that many executives have is thinking, oh, writer can just come out here and just write anything. And a writer just can't do that. No, it takes prep time. I know when I'm working on concepts, sometimes I'll sit on a concept for years before I go out here and put fingers to the keyboard for it. Many books that I've done, I've just sat on them for a while because I didn't have the story there or the details there, and I didn't have anything I could draw from experience from. So a lot of people, they look at writers again today, and I've seen a lot of people on social media, again, they've been deriding writers as related to bad material, but the bad material comes from really bad executives who want to go out here and hire inexperienced writers, not understanding you're ruining the entertainment business by going out here and hiring an inexperienced writer, because a writer is the foundation for your material, whether it be a comic book, whether it be a TV show, whether it be a movie, whether it be a stage play. The only way to get good content is when you go out here and you focus on the script. It's something similar to what I hear YouTuber Sprayway Custom says. He says in order to get a good paint job, it starts with the prep. Well, in order to get a good comic book, good movie, and good TV show, it all starts with the prep on the script. Because if the writer doesn't do prep on the script, such as laying out their concept clearly, developing their characters, in a multidimensional way, going out here and really doing their research as related to their subject and really laying out their storylines to make sure that they have a clear beginning, middle, and end, and answer the three critical questions. Who is the main character? What do they want? And why should we care? If that writer doesn't do the prep on their story, then their story isn't going to be strong. And that's how you get a really bad movie, bad comic book, bad TV series, because the writer didn't take the time to work on their material. That writer didn't take the time to go out here and do the prep work on the details to make sure that everything basically plays like a movie in the imagination of the audience as related to paper media, and plays like a fast going movie in a movie theater or a fast paced TV show. Because when it comes to books, it should be like a movie in people's minds as I see it. I mean, you should be imagining things going on like a movie where you can just imagine all the characters coming to life. And when you're doing a comic, you want the pages to just come to life. And that's one of the things I try to do when I'm writing stories. I really want everything to come to life for you. And again, that's something an inexperienced writer cannot do because they really don't know the mechanics of writing. Because again, this is a craft. And because it's a craft, a writer has to understand the mechanics of everything as related to structure and form. And these are things that you cannot really learn in a college or a university. No, this is a craft. And with crafts, you have to learn them firsthand. And again, the way you learn them firsthand is at the side of a seasoned writer. That's how you really learn a lot of these techniques. In some on a movie set or in a comic company. I mean, usually there's an editor there to give you guidance. There's somebody there to give you some support and show you how things work. I mean, I learned from reading a lot of different blogs. Like I learned from reading Jim Shooter's blog about entry points, which is why books like in the Isis, Esteem, and John Haynes series, you can just easily get into them from beginning, middle, and end. And from any book, and you can just pick up any book and have no problem getting in. I learned from guys like Jim Shooter. I learned from different writers out here. And again, while I never really talked to some of them, I did go out here and learn from reading about them and doing research. And I also learned by just going out here and talking to other people and getting feedback on the kind of stories that I do. So a seasoned writer, again, we learn from our experience and we learn from working with other writers. So we learn and we develop techniques and develop abilities to, again, work on our craft. But many people don't really appreciate the craft of a writer these days. And they think anybody can write anything. But that's what also is ruining the entertainment business with movies, TV, and comic books. This arrogant notion from many editors and many executives, they think, oh, anybody can write anything at any time. Like when I recently read about the Ms. Marvel actress Amani Villani, or whatever her name is, she's supposed to be writing the new Ms. Marvel comic. And she says, oh, I'm writing it like fan fiction, basically putting the nail in the coffin for that book and putting the nail in the coffin for that book, because they're going to go out here and get this inexperienced writer who is young, has no life experience, does not know how panels work, because that was one thing I took me years to understand, that every page is important in a comic and every page has to sequence and make it where the last panel makes you turn the page. That is essential to comic book writing, because if the last panel on the page doesn't make the person turn the page, the person will stop reading and stop caring. So there are a lot of different things that go into writing. And what's really sad about I'm seeing in the entertainment industry is people take the skill of writing for granted, because what I hear from a lot of people these days is that, oh, anybody can be a writer. Anybody can go out here and write anything. No, writing is a craft, and like a chef, you have to learn the rules for writing. You have to learn techniques for writing, and you have to learn how the models work as related to whatever you're writing. And this is a skill set that a writer has, but many people take for granted. And they think, oh, I can just hire anybody. But if you hire just anybody, you're not going to get quality results. You're not going to get quality results as a writer because you don't understand how things work as related to the mechanics of storytelling. And if you don't understand how things work as related to the mechanics of storytelling, you're going to write something that is not of quality, and in many cases will be really bad because you haven't really worked out much of the structures as related to main character, what they want, why should we care, the whole plot line as related to making everything in the story sequence. This is essential to your story. And another thing that I find with a lot of inexperienced writers, in addition to their just inability to have life experience, their lack of depth, their lack of layering, and their just total lack of personality and voice in their characters. Because when I look at characters like Kamala Khan, Ms. Marvel, they never have a voice, or many of what they call the SJW characters in movies and film, they really don't have a personality or voice. That's a real problem that I see with a lot of these bad writers. They really don't understand, how to create a character that comes to life and speaks to the audience. And another thing that I find that's really bad with a lot of these inexperienced writers is they really, in addition to the nuance, don't really put any psychology in their stories. Now, one of the problems I find with a lot of these, what they call SJW type movies and TV shows and comic books, is there is no psychology because an inexperienced writer does not know how to use psychology. Now, psychology is something that I oftentimes put in my stories. Like I oftentimes put in things as related to, like in the book John Haynes, The Man with Nothing to Lose, the Block character has an obsession with John Haynes. That was something that I learned when I was watching shows like Batman, the animated series, and Gargoyles. They oftentimes used a lot of psychology as related to developing the character's motivation. They used a lot of psychology as related to making the story flow. And this really allows us to get in the character's head to see what motivates them to do what they're doing. More importantly, it allows us to see why they do what they do. And it adds an extra dimension into the story that draws the audience in, because psychology, what it does is it allows us to get to know the internal aspects of a character. It allows us to get to know who this person is and what motivates them to do what they do. It's an internal trait that allows us to become more personally connected to someone. That's one of the things I did with John Haynes, The Man with Nothing to Lose. That's what I do with many of my books, like Spellbound, where we get to see Matilda, the introvert. We get to know what motivates her, what's making her stay away from people, why she's having problems. Again, this gives us something that is human to the character, allows us to connect with the character, and allows us to see them as a person. This psychology, it just really makes you really think about this person and think about what they're going through. So there's a lot more to a character. And again, inexperienced screenwriters and comic writers don't understand psychology, and because they don't understand psychology, what we get are these just very shallow, very Mary Sue type characters who never have to deal with conflict. And again, a character, in order for them to grow, we need to see them dealing with conflict. Moreover, we need to see them having flaws, because flaws are very important, because flaws allow us to have a story, because a flaw that a character has allows us to see that this person, one, is just like us, and two, allows us to see that this character has an issue that they have to work with, and that issue is something they have to overcome over the course of the story. Like in the case of Spellbound, Matilda had to overcome her being an introvert and find her voice. In the case of John Haynes, he had to find a job and learn how to work as a CEO. In the case of Esteem and Temptation of John Haynes, she had to learn how to face her fears as related to her humanity. And there's a lot, again, that goes into a story when you go out here and focus on the character's flaws. The character's flaws are the thing that are going to drive your story, in addition to a good antagonist, which is what I don't see in many of what they call the SJW comics or the SJW entertainment. A lot of these inexperienced writers can't write bad guys because they are afraid of hurting their characters. That's something I saw in the Lucasfilm sequel trilogies. They were so afraid of hurting Rey that they did not write her a compelling villain. And if you can't write a compelling villain, then you're not ready to be a writer, because a seasoned writer understands that I need a strong antagonist, because a strong antagonist is going to go out here and drive the story, one. And two, the strong antagonist, what they're going to do is go out here and find the character's flaws. And if they can find the character's flaws and exploit them, then that character is going to be forced to grow, and that character is going to be forced to change throughout the story. So what I see with a lot of what they call SJW woke writers that people complain about is that a lot of these writers are just inexperienced, and they are afraid to have their characters go through conflict, have their characters go through pain. But a seasoned writer, they're not afraid of having their character lose. They're not afraid of having their characters fail or fall down. No, we want them to do this because this is going to allow the audience to see this character grow and change and make efforts to move themselves forward. That is important, because when you have a seasoned writer, they're going to go out here and tell a story where you see this character being forced to change because things in their life just aren't going to be in a place where they can stay in the same place. So this is important for readers and viewers to go out here and see. But an inexperienced writer, they can't do that because, again, they have personal attachments like Kathleen Kennedy has to characters like Rey and the new character from Indiana Jones, because they're avatars of themselves and they're not their own characters with their own lives. And that's something a seasoned writer can do, because they say, okay, this character is their own person. They're living their own life, and I have to let them live their own life, and I have to let them go. That is one of the things that seasoned writers can do. A seasoned writer can say, okay, this character has to go through this conflict, and they have to deal with this issue. And yes, it may be kind of hard for an inexperienced writer to say, oh, my character has to go through this. But the whole thing is, a character has to go through whatever they're going through, and you have to let them suffer, because the audience needs to see this character grow. And again, inexperienced writers, they go out here and do things like what we see in Star Wars and Indiana Jones and even parts of the MCU. They create these know-it-all characters who get everything given to them, never really go through any sort of journey, never go through any sort of pain, never lose in any way, shape, or form, never fall down. And what happens is that character, we never really get anything out of that story outside of the superficial. And what I see a lot of executives doing is, you have these superficial characters like Rey from Star Wars, and they try to cover up everything with that character with special effects. But the whole thing is, special effects cannot help a weak story become strong. No, special effects only help a strong story improve, because what makes for a great story, again, is the foundation of having great planning as related to your story, and making sure that you have a quality script before you go out here and put a production together. This is something that when I'm working on a comic like a John Haynes at Death's Door, or I'm working on a book like a John Haynes 87, or a John Haynes Godbreaker, or an ISIS Legacy, one of the things I try to do is make sure that the foundation of the story is strong, so that everything else that's built on it, like in the case of John Haynes at Death's Door, Antonio Baldari had something really solid to work with, because in order for him to make great pictures out of the story, he had to have a solid script. And I wanted to make sure he had the very best script so that he could go out here and put together a rock solid story. That was my goal as a writer and as a publisher. I don't want to just go to an artist and say, oh, here's a script. Just go out here and draw it, like what we see what many people complain about at Marvel and DC, and even with many of these movies. No, I want to go out here, and because I'm a seasoned writer, I want to make sure that my material is the best, so that when talent works with it, they can go out here and improve it and take it to the next level. I have to give them a strong foundation as related to my base, and take the base and build on the base. And that's something that the artist can work with, like an Antonio Baldari or a Bill Walker or a Mike Williams. They can go out here and work with what I've given them. And if I can give them quality from the beginning, they can go out here and work with that and build it up to something and make it really pop. Because again, it takes a good script for a artist to have and to imagine imagery from, and that starts with the script. So you have to work starting with your script, and this is where Hollywood takes writing for granted. And a lot of people out here I've seen, they take writers for granted. They say, oh, we don't really need writers. No, you need a quality writer, and you will know the difference between a quality writer and an inexperienced writer based on what they put on their page. There is a difference between an inexperienced writer who puts something on the page and a seasoned writer who puts something on the page. An inexperienced writer, what they're going to do is go out here and put stuff on the page based on emotion, and they're going to just write from emotion based on what they think they know something is. Whereas a seasoned writer, when we go out here and put fingers to the keyboard, we are not just coming from emotion. We are coming from life experience. We are also coming from research to reinforce our details. And we also are coming from a place where we have done our research as related to things like psychology, things like family dynamics, things like relationship dynamics, things like personalities and people we've experienced. And coming from all of these different aspects of life, a writer can come out here and give you a vibrant picture that really just has so many details that it fills your imagination. That is where a seasoned writer is coming from. And a seasoned writer, again, is going to come out here and really just create something where you're going, wow, I never thought about things that way. I never thought that this story could be that compelling. It could be a subject, again, that other people would consider to be mundane, but this guy brings it to life because he's drawing from experience, he's drawing from research, and bringing it to life. Or this girl, they're bringing it to life, and it just gives you it just changes your perspective on things. And that's the difference between a seasoned writer and an inexperienced one. And again, many of what we're seeing such garbage entertainment has to do with the bad writing is coming from the fact that they hire inexperienced people. And again, an inexperienced person who doesn't know the business and doesn't know the craft of writing, they're going to create something like She-Hulk Attorney at Law. And what I found to be sad about She-Hulk Attorney at Law was you had a head writer who never knew anything about court, never wanted to go out here and even watch YouTube videos of court trials. You have a character who's an attorney at law, but this person never once did any research, never talked to a lawyer. And I looked at that back then and I shook my head, because a writer's job is to do research, but they wanted to go out here and push identity politics as related to She-Hulk being a strong woman. But I didn't see anything outside of physical strength, which was shallow. But the whole structure of that show wasn't strong. And they tried to play it off by saying, oh, we meant to do that, but it didn't come off that way. It just came across as bad writing. But the bad writing was due to inexperienced writers. And sadly, you have experienced executives who greenlit these writers, approved these writers' projects, and basically set these writers up for failure. And as they set these writers up for failure, they did damage to the entertainment business, because I see the real problem in the entertainment industry, whether it be comics, whether it be TV, whether it be movies, is executives going out here and looking to try to get cheap, inexperienced writers. And as they go out here looking to try to save a few dollars, they wind up costing themselves their professional reputation. They wind up costing themselves damage to their brands, and they don't really think about the long-term cost, because they're trying to save a few dollars as they're trying to fleece some sort of rookie. Head Ninja, they could have brought a lawyer in, but they didn't want to, because they wanted to tell their SJW story. So that's why they didn't really want to bring in a lawyer, because a lawyer, again, is going to push back if they're in a consultant role and say, hey, this isn't what's done in court. We don't really act like that in court, that there's professional protocols in a courtroom. The judge wants to have a serious and formal decorum. And those are the kind of things that they talk about. And I'm glad to see you here, Head Ninja. I know you're late, but the whole thing is I started the stream a little earlier. I think I started a little like 11:20, but I was, it just happens. I need to start announcing these streams more often. Hey, Dark Titan, glad to see you here. Keating Rourke, yeah, Rogue One was underrated. It was a very well done story, but the whole thing is it came in after Rey showed up, and that's what really took a lot of the thunder away from Rogue One. What's going on, Dark Titan? What's going on, Ray Hanna, the Hanna Force? What's going on, Nightingale Wednesday Nightmare? I didn't know that they were trying to do the same thing to voice acting. I mean, it looks like Hollywood is trying to cheap out Marcellus Prime as related to a lot of the crafts. And when you go out here and cheap out on the crafts, you're really going to mess up the business, because you have to pay people what they're worth, because their skills have value. And really skilled people, you got to really appreciate those skills, because when a creator like myself comes in, we're not just giving you just our basic skills as related to writing. We're bringing a lot of experience with us. We're bringing a lot of craft with us. And a craftsperson, when you go and get a craftsperson, when they go out here, we have standards for our projects. We have standards for how we put our projects together. We want to make sure our projects are the very best. So they're trying to cheap out and hire inexperienced people, but you need experienced people to show you how things work. One full boss left a comment about the transitions of John Haynes at Death's Door. Those were deliberate by design. I really wanted the transitions to really make it where it was flowing like sort of like a TV show or an animated movie. I really wanted it to really move, and that's the way I'm glad you like the way I set up the panels, but all that is what a seasoned writer does. We have to think about how we're going to do things in a comic as related to the panels. Whenever I'm writing a script, like right now I'm writing a script for Isis, the Beauty Myth, and I have to really think about how I want the panels to move, and I really have to think about how I want the sequences to go. I mean, that takes a lot of time. You just don't write that really quickly. You have to really sit down and think about where you want the sequence to move and how you want these panels to go. And sometimes I would take a page apart and put a page back together. Sometimes I would move a panel in order to make a scene transition a little better. I mean, this is the thing that I just really take my time on. I mean, I write multiple drafts when I'm writing a script. I mean, when I wrote John Haynes at Death's Door, I originally wrote it and like as I was writing the book. But as I worked on the script, I gave the time to rest, and then I went out here and did something else, then came back to it and saw how the sequences were flowing. And this is the type of work that a craftsperson does when they're working on a script. They just don't I'm just writing 5-6 panels and I'm just going to move on. No, I want all the panels to sequence so that when you're looking at the page, you're reading it quickly and going from page to page, and the panels are moving and allowing you to read the entire story and really get into the story. So that's what an experienced writer does when they're working on a script. When we work on scripts, we really go out here and work to make sure everything is flowing as related to panels, as related to sequences. I mean, it's a lot of work that goes into the business, and it's something people take for granted. I mean, a lot of people take a good writer for granted, and they really don't appreciate a good writer until you have to experience a bad writer. And that's where people start going, oh, I really wish that that writer stayed on. But the whole thing is you don't really understand how important a writer is. And that's one of the things that I see that is destroying the entertainment business is you have a lot of people who really don't understand the importance of a good writer. They don't understand, you need a person who has a bit of seasoning, a bit of experience as related to the craft. You just can't pull a 22-year-old kid out of a university and say, hey, he's a screenwriter, because that 22, 23, even 24, 25-year-old kid, they really have not lived enough life. So if you have them writing something, it's just going to come across as really shallow, and it's going to come across as just really shallow, and just, if not, it's going to lack elements. Characters are going to be underdeveloped. Characters' personalities aren't going to be strong. Their voices aren't going to be strong. They're not going to speak to the audience. They're not going to connect with the audience. So there's a lot of problems as related to American entertainment. And the foundations are, as I see it, are really cheap executives, really greedy executives who will do anything for not only big box office, but also to get a big budget. And what they want to do is cut corners as related to their budgets by not paying a writer what they're worth. Then because they don't want to pay a writer what they're worth, what they do is go out here and look to cut a corner by finding themselves some 21, 22, or even 25-year-old rookie who's out of a university, who's got a big head because they've got a big degree in some cases, because some of these guys will be like, oh, I got a degree in sociology, I got a degree in anthropology, I have a chance to go out here and be able to put what my teachers told me to work. But the whole thing is you haven't lived life to see if many of the approaches you learned in college really will be ones you can use. This was something that I learned the hard way when I was in college. I mean, when I was in college, I learned a lot of things, but when I got out of college, I had to unlearn a lot of what I learned because the world ran completely different. And that was one of the other things that I could draw from, because when I was writing Legendary Mad Matilda, I thought about my life experience of coming out of college in my 20s and how hard life was. I drew all from that, from my life experience of college and coming out of college and learning that the world was different from what I was told. And that's where I was able to draw all the pain Matilda went through in Legendary Mad Matilda. But we have people who think, oh, I'm coming out of college, I'm going to take what my professors told me. And that's another reason why we get so much of this, what they call SJW material, because a lot of these kids, they've come out of the colleges. They think everything their professor told them is true. But when you go out into the real world, you find out everything is completely different. And that's one of the things that I learned, again, when I came out of college, when I was about 21, 22, and I just learned that the world was, again, the job market doesn't really care about your degrees. The job market, they only want to see your experience, and that's something a lot of people don't know about. They don't really know that when they get a job real quick. When you get a job real quick, you take things for granted, and you think that everything that your professor told you about the social justice, because a lot of our colleges are really far left, and far left is like an echo chamber, because many of our colleges are like an echo chamber. And again, the inexperienced writer is coming from that echo chamber of college, coming from what their professors told them, and not coming from what they need to know in the real world. So again, writers, you need, a lot of people, they think, oh, anybody can write. But writers need to have certain experience. They need to have certain life experience. They need to have honing of craft. And these are things that the entertainment business has taken for granted. And they don't see how taking a good writer for granted is doing damage to American entertainment. I mean, it's doing devastating damage because if your writers don't have life experience, they can't tell a great, compelling story. If they don't have seasoning in their craft, they don't know how to structure a story. If you don't have a writer who knows about how to use different techniques, they're not going to be able to use things to make very unique stories. So when I look at American entertainment, there's a real problem with these inexperienced writers. And while some are upset about many of these inexperienced writers going on strike, the big problem that led to a lot of these writers getting jobs was greedy executives. And again, the greedy executives, they're the ones who are hiring these inexperienced writers. And in the case of companies like Marvel, they're hiring inexperienced editors who don't know the characters, don't know the craft of comics, don't know the craft of the business. And these inexperienced writers, again, are ruining the entertainment business because they don't really have anybody there to give them guidance. They don't have anybody there to teach them the basics because writing is a craft, sort of like going to trade school. It is a craft, and you need somebody there to go out here and give you guidance on how things work. You need somebody out here to go out here and give you guidance on how to learn how to work with things as related to the rules of writing. You need somebody there to give you seasoning and guidance and really give you feedback that will let you know where you're going wrong and give you feedback to let you know, okay, this is how we go out here and tell a story, because storytelling does have rules. Storytelling does have standards, and storytelling has to be done in a certain way in order to reach and resonate to the audience. So this is something that's not being taught, and you have people who don't understand how important it is to be taught, because what I hear from people as related to the WGA strike, they're saying, oh, F those writers. But no, you need to understand it's the executives who hired inexperienced writers, and your beef is with the executives for hiring inexperienced people instead of hiring seasoned people to go out here and craft the story. Because again, there's a big difference between a seasoned writer like myself and a seasoned screenwriter like myself who has 20 plus years in the game. When we go out here and tell a story, it's going to be solid. It's going to have solid structure, solid form, and you're going to be immersed in a world. That's what you're going to get, because when you hire seasoned writers, what you're going to get is a quality product that allows you to make money and sell your show or your movie to advertisers, be able to sell your product as related to streaming subs. I mean, everything starts with a writer. And if you don't hire a good writer, you're not going to get a good product, whether it be a book, whether it be a comic, whether it be an action, whatever you do, it's just not going to be good, because you need a seasoned writer to go out here and do that. I mean, that's what you need to do. I mean, Marcellus Prime, researching 90s and 80s Black shows. Yeah, you just start by watching shows from the 90s and the 80s. That's what I did. I grew up with starting with Benson and the Cosby Show, and those were the start of the 80s shows. And I just watched the entire run. I would just go out here and watch the runs to get a sense of the stories and the storytelling. That's how you start in doing your research for 90s and 80s Black shows. I mean, when I was writing All About Marilyn, the show All About Nikki that Marilyn was a part of was one of those low budget teen sitcoms that used to come on TNBC or used to come on the cable shows like Nickelodeon. So I would just go out here and watch those shows to get a sense of those shows. And that's how I was able to write not only All About Marilyn, but also All About Nikki. I was able to do that because I just sat down and watched the shows. And that's where you get your research from. That's part of your research, is you got to watch the shows. I would just recommend you just go buy the DVDs of Benson, Good Times, The Cosby Show, Family Matters, and even go out here and try to find some of the more obscure shows like Homeroom, which got canceled after a season, and other shows like The Parenthood, Living Single, Martin. I mean, even when I'm writing other female characters, I would go out here and buy DVD sets like Daria. I mean, when I want to go out here and learn about characters, I go out here and I go buy those box sets. as part of my research. I mean, that's what I do. Tavania, yeah, you can buy the Parkers if you want, if you want to write a character like that. It's a good show to research. I mean, it's got a lot of stereotypes, but it's a good show to research as part of what you're writing. I mean, when you're writing stories and characters, you really want to go out here and find as much material as you can so that everything can become, rich and vivid. I mean, that's what you have to do. I mean, if you want to do black shows, then you have to go find them on DVD or go find them on YouTube. I mean, when I go out here and I want to learn how to write in a certain way or learn, different characters and different types of stories, I will go do the research and go watch different things in order to be able to present content. So that's all part of developing your craft and your skills as a writer. I mean, the ones I wouldn't recommend, Tavania, is I wouldn't watch no PJs. That show was hard to watch. There's a couple of them out there, but Preston episodes, I couldn't get through that one. They had episodes on YouTube. But anything, if it's related to whatever character you're doing, you go out here and you just go find the DVDs. And that's something that you can do as part of your research. Or you can go over to YouTube. And if you can't find certain shows or certain movies, you go out here and go look for them on YouTube. I mean, that's how I found some shows out here. And I would just go, oh, this show is on YouTube now? Oh, I'm going to go see that. So that's something I do. And again, I'm always doing research. And when I'm doing a story, like right recently, I had just finished Isis Dark Incubus. And I did more research on the Incubus like I did for the Succubus. And I also did research on Soul Ties. Even though I had watched many of Ringo's videos on the subject, I went and did even more research. So every story requires a writer to do research, and you have to, and that's going to make your story richer. It's going to make it where it's more vivid in the reader's imagination. And it's a part of the craft and the skills that you learn. And again, they take a writer's skills for granted. I know I keep repeating it, but you can't take a writer's skills for granted, because with a good writer, you're going to get a quality product. With a good writer, you're going to get a compelling story. With a good writer, you're going to get characters with personality and voice. With a good writer, you're going to get nuance, you're going to get layers, you're going to get humor. And these are core elements to presenting a quality story. So a lot of people out here, they sit there and go, oh, I can just hire anybody to write. No, you can't hire anybody to write. I mean, you need to get a solid writer, like Elijah's talking about with the late Len Wein, who's one of the great comic writers who gave us partially the all-new, all-different X-Men with Chris Claremont, and basically, again, revolutionized the X-Men from being a dying comic to becoming a major brand. I mean, a solid writer, when you go out here and hire a good, solid writer, it's a completely different experience. And again, the quality that you're going to get is going to lead to you building an audience. So that's going to be the thing that sells your story to readers. And Hollywood and many businesses in Hollywood, like comic books, they take their writers for granted, and they think, oh, I can go hire this kid and they'll do it. No, you get what you pay for. And I would rather pay a person to do a quality job, like I did with John Haynes at Death's Door, or when I go out here and I pay for the covers of books like 87 and Godbreaker and Isis Legacy. I would rather just put the money on the table and pay for quality rather than go out here and try to just call myself cutting corners, because when I cut corners, I cut my costs, but I wind up costing myself my audience. And again, this is where experience is important, and you can't go out here and discount experience. No, you need to pay people what they're worth and continue to pay them, because the last project that they produce is going to make a measure as related to quality. And this is something many executives don't understand. They don't understand that the last project a creator works on it says something about the people there. And if you're producing poor quality, it's because you're not going out here and hiring quality talent. And again, quality talent starts with the writer. because the writer lays the foundation for your finished product. Now, I'm going to get ready to wrap up tonight's stream, and I'm asking everybody, to pick up a copy of John Haynes at Death's Door. Everybody has made a lot, in the chat has spoken positively about the John Haynes comic, and you guys can get your own copy to see what One Phobos was talking about, and everybody's been talking about, and you can get a copy on lulu.com right now. And you can also go out here and pick up the SJS Direct 2023 books, John Haynes 1987, on Amazon.com. I got my first 5-star review for John Haynes 87, and you can get that book along with John Haynes Godbreaker, the two 2023 books, and ISIS Legacy. You can get all of these books on Amazon.com in paperback and Kindle format. You can also get all these books at other online booksellers like Barnes & Noble, the iBookstore, Google Play, Walmart, and Target. So you can get all of those books on Amazon.com, and you guys can get, we got 26 in the room. Let's get the likes up before I go. And you guys can get all those books on Amazon.com. They are fun, fast reads. And again, a lot of the viewers have given me positive feedback on these books. And I try to make sure that the quality is really solid and consistent on any project that I do. And I go out here and make every effort to make the projects the best they can be. Now, if you guys want to continue to help me to stay on the air and be able to make more comics like John Haynes at Death's Door, because I really want to do an ISIS comic book. That's why I'm working on ISIS, the Beauty Myth script right now. I really want to get another comic out there for you guys to enjoy. So if you guys could go over and donate to the Cash App or the PayPal or the Patreon, that would be greatly appreciated, because that allows me to, one, stay on the air, and two, be able to continue producing great projects like I do on the SJS Direct imprint. So I want to thank everybody for coming out to tonight's stream. I really appreciate all of you guys taking your, if you're living on the East Coast, going out here and spending your Saturday morning with me. And if you're on the West Coast, spending your evening with me. Really appreciate it, because I have people all over the world. Thank you guys for coming out. Thank you for the super chat, Luciano Casanova. Sorry that you're battling depression, but there's you'll get through it. I mean, I'm hoping you'll be all right. If you want to talk about things, we can talk about things offline. Hi from Seattle to Vanya. That's way out there. So you're in the middle of the evening over there. And again, a thank you for coming out, Tavanya, this evening and, spending time with me. Thank you, One Phobos, for taking the time to watch. I'm hoping that this stream helps you. I've been rare that I've done a writing stream, but I had to do one because I see so many people complaining about Hollywood writers not understanding how important a writer is. So I really enjoyed doing the stream, really enjoyed sharing with you guys. And I'm hoping you guys will be here for next week's stream. Thank you all. Everybody have a good evening, and everybody have a good night.